Oh. Satchidanandarupaya Vishvotpatyadihetave Tapatraya Vinashaya Shri Krishnaya Vayam Numaha. Janmadyasya yatonvayati tarataschaarteshvabhignaswarat Tene Brahma Hridaya Adi Kavaye Muhyanti Yat Surayaha Tejo Vari Mridam Yatha Vinimayo Yatra Trisargo Mrisha Dhamna Sve Sada Nirasta Kuhakam Satyam Param Dhimahi Dharma Projita Kaita Votra Paramo Nirmatsaranam Satam Vedyam Vastavamatra Vastu Shivadam Tapatrayonmulanam Srimad Bhagavate Mahamuni Krite Kim Va Parerishwaraha Sadyo Hridya Varudyate Trakritibihi Shushrushubistakshanat. Hari Om and greetings from Niagara Falls. Bhagavan Krishna shares that his bhakta should be praised more than him. The bhakta should be served more than him. And the logic of this is that it's through bhaktas that Bhagavan nurtures, manifests yasha. Yasha means reverence. Yasha means fame. Puja Swami Tejo Mayananda shared, it's Bhagavan's bhaktas that make Bhagavan famous. And the visualization that was given is that Bhagavan is like a chandan tree, a sandalwood tree, and a bhakta is a breeze, the one who spreads the fragrance of Bhagavan. And so for all of us, we are engaged in this katha, where we're internalizing Bhagavan through our ears. But this is not just a katha for us. This is Vedanta, a vision. And so from our ears to our mind. And you will know that you are a bhakta, because if Bhagavan enters your mind, then your whole lifestyle will be to bring fame to Bhagavan, to help others revere Bhagavan. You will think it, you will say it, you will act it. So are you a breeze? Our children, some of their favorite words are poo-poo, fart, and so on. They're at home right now, so I'm thinking, are you a breeze or are you a fart? We are working on being a breeze. In the 11th section, the 19th chapter, Rishi Uddhava asks many questions. The beginning of the chapter, these questions are more absolute in nature. And later on in the chapter, they're more relative in nature. And Sri Krishna compassionately answers these questions in a way that is simple, rememberable, practicable. Not so much for Rishi Uddhava, but for us. One of the insights that Sri Krishna shares at an absolute level is that bhakti is the best yoga, because it's the simplest yoga. Many times today I've shared that which is simple is that which can be remembered. That which is remembered is that which can be practiced. With bhakti, the means and the ends are the same. For the majority of what we do in life, the means and the ends are different. With bhakti, they're the same. That makes this simpler, correct? That's why bhakti is described as ananya. There is no other. The means and ends are one. And Sri Krishna ends this chapter sharing, what is the use of labels? Rishi Uddhava, you're so immersed in what's papa and punya, what's bad and good. Tell me about comparisons like heaven and hell. And Bhagavan Krishna ends this chapter sharing, what is the use of these labels? You are absolute. Then why invest so much in that which is relative? In the 11th section, there's a shift from Katha to Vedanta. The 10th section is very much about the Katha. What did Bhagavan Krishna eat? Whom did he marry? Now this section is about the Vedanta. It is harder hitting for one's mind. We need this. In Springfield, Illinois, they are resuming in-person classes. And so a seeker in our community asked me, what can I do to help nurture Balavihar, nurture this program in Springfield, Illinois? And so I wrote out to her some points. One of the first points I wrote to her was, first generation seekers like me need more insights and need less rituals. And so this is so evident between chapters or sections 10 and 11. Section 10 is more Katha, correct? And section 11 is more Vedanta, more of these insights. This will have a longer lasting impact on us. In the 20th chapter, Rishi Uddhava wants more details about what the best yoga is. And Sri Krishna has already answered that it's bhakti, but Rishi Uddhava wants to know why bhakti yoga is the best. And Bhagavan Krishna responds sharing, it is your level of independence that determines which yoga, which path you should follow. If you're highly dependent or attached, then karma yoga. Engage in the right actions, and that will nurture the right attitude. If you're highly independent, detached, then it's jnana yoga. You feel everything is relative, is maya, and so keep freeing yourself from this. If you're in between, being dependent and independent, attached and detached, then bhakti yoga, where you love more. You love a person not for their name and form, but for their qualities. Then there's nothing to escape from. There's nothing to renounce. I'd shared a special verse in chapter 20 with all of you last week. I'm sharing it again. This section, these chapters are about practice. What path do I follow? What are the practices on this path? In the 20th chapter, I'm coming back to the 17th shloka. Nirdehamadyam sulabham sudurlabham plavam sukalpam guru karnadharam mayανukule nanabhasvateritam puman bhavabdim nataret sa atmaha. Listen carefully to the definition of these words. Nirdeham adyam. It is one's fortune to have the body of a human. It is sulabham, which means you got this without any effort. Sudurlabham, but you got this through a lot of evolution. Stones, plants, animals, even the semi-gods want a human body. Plavam, this body is like a boat. Sukalpam guru karnadharam, and the captain of this boat is one's guide. Sukalpam, he knows where to go, how to go. They're a guide. Mayānukulena, and on this boat with the captain of one's guru, then there's favorable winds, our opportunities that Sri Krishna has manifested. Nabhasvata ritam, these favorable winds are pushing you forward, are helping you to evolve. However, Puman bhavabdim natare, the one who does not invest and immerse themselves in becoming independently joyous and becoming free, then sa atmaha, they have wasted the captain, the winds, the boat. They have wasted their opportunity. In this chapter, Bhagavan Krishna explains what the vision and action statements of yoga is. The vision of yoga is to restrain the mind. And the action of yoga is to reflect with the mind. Which yoga is the best? Bhakti. We are all most fortunate that in this path, we have so much grace. We have winds, we have a captain. What is Bhakti Yoga to do to me? My mind is to be restrained from articles, beings, and circumstances, and it is to reflect on the divine. Bhakti Yoga is such a pure path that one doesn't even desire enlightenment, because that too is a desire. When one reflects on the divine, you don't have to desire the divine, you just have to be divine. Swami Tejomayananda had shared about this chapter. You follow whatever path is natural to you, and the fulfillment of this path is all of the paths come together. I like to think of this as a diamond. Imagine the bottom point of a diamond is karma yoga. And then based on your personality, you either go left, let's say that's bhakti yoga, and right, that's jnana yoga. But then the diamond points come back together, correct? So follow what is natural. Is everyone clear about chapters 19 and 20? Is everyone happy about chapters 19 and 20? Does everyone know what to do with chapters 19 and 20? Okay. We continue to chapter 21. Right now, there's a theme of Bhagavan Krishna sharing with Rishi Uddhava what is the use of labels. So in this chapter, he's explaining relativity in a general way. And the purpose of explaining relativity is that it's never going to make you feel absolute. If you are incomplete and you associate with another person who's incomplete, what do you think's going to happen? You're going to feel more incomplete. So he's really zooming into the relativity of our experiences, our equipments, the ego. In chapter 21, verse 19, that is your reference. This comes directly from Bhagavad Gita. Vishayeshu gunadhyasat pumsas sangastato bhavet sangat tatra bhavet kamaha kamad eva kalirnam. Vishayeshu guna adhyasat. The more that one thinks about articles, beings, and circumstances, the more one is infatuated with sense objects. Sangatato bhavet, then naturally one gets attached to what they're thinking about. Sounds familiar from Bhagavad Gita so far. Then what happens? From that sangha, bhavet kamaha. The thinking leads to attachment. The attachment leads to desire. Everyone sees chapter 2's ladder of fall. Okay. Now this is what's unique to Bhagavatam now. Kamat eva kalihi. In Bhagavad Gita, what is shared is, from desire comes anger. Here, what is shared is, from desire comes kalihi, which means conflict. The Bhagavad Gita presents its teaching in a war, a fight. Now, for all of us, we are also in a war, in a fight with our own desires. If you have conflict in your life, that's the war, that's the fight. But think of the genesis of this. It came from desire, which came from attachment, which came from thinking. I'll read to you in English how this ladder continues to fall. It is verses 19 to 22 for you to further study. From conflicts arise uncontrollable anger. This is followed by delusion, complete inability to distinguish right and wrong, the proper and the improper. Delusion quickly swallows his moral sense completely. Oh, good friend, humans then become a zero as far as their humanity is concerned. They are as good as dead. They lose all the great values obtainable through a human life. They merely exist, absorbing food like a tree and breathing like a pair of bellows. Due to their excitement with sensuous enjoyments, they know not anything about their own real nature, nor do they have any love and sympathy for others. As you think, so you develop. If you think of materials, you will become inert like that material. And the key point here is the kalihi. We describe that we live in Kali Yuga where there's conflict and we see that outside, but how did it start? It started from being distracted. What are you thinking about right now? You may be thinking about what I'm sharing, but rarely do we know what we're thinking about. We have this natural devolving of distraction into this, into that, which is why consistently in this course and all of our workshops, I've encouraged everyone to unitask. By unitasking, one is not distracted. By unitasking, one doesn't overthink. If you overthink what someone said to you yesterday, you're reliving that. Unitasking prevents this fall from happening. In the middle of this chapter, Bhagavan Krishna is sharing with Prince Arjuna morals, labels, these are all relative. He gives so many examples of how morality is different for someone who's less evolved. Their morality is lower. For someone who's more evolved, their morality is higher. Their standard is higher, correct? The same goes with labels. If your job is to judge people, then you should label. But if your job is not to judge people, then don't label. So morality, labels, these are all relative. And Bhagavan Krishna ends this chapter with, how do you know if you're understanding what Bhagavan Krishna is teaching? You first feel that all of your experiences are manifest. They are real. Until your relationship with Vedanta, did you ever question if you are more than the body? Until your relationship with Vedanta, did you ever have a purpose more than your family? Everything was real, correct? This body is real, my family is real. But the more you understand relativity, going with this acronym, you feel your experiences, your equipments are Maya. They're not real, they're relatively real. They come, they go. As Pujya Swami Tejomayananda shares, if it can asakti, it can jasakti. Asakti means attachment, and he's playing with that. And then in Hindi, ja means go. So if you can get attached to it, that means it's going to leave also. So you start to feel all is Maya. And when you understand how relative this is, if there's a relative, there has to be a absolute. In the early part of April, I'm speaking for a social entrepreneurship class. They're having a gathering on inspired change, shared future. And so the subject I'm specifically speaking on, self-development equals societal development. And one of the points I had to tell them what I'm going to speak about, nobody trusts anyone anymore. And it's the worst for me because I don't think about what I'm going to speak about so far in advance. But one of the points I wrote out was understanding if one is a part, then one has a responsibility to the whole. Agreed? If there's a puzzle piece, that means there has to be a full puzzle. If you feel you're an individual, then naturally there's a total. So if you understand relativity fully, that this is Maya, then you also know there's an absolute. And going with this acronym then, what is all of this? Me, as in Bhagavan Krishna. So the least mature person thinks this is manifest. The more mature person thinks this is Maya, but the most mature person thinks this is me, Bhagavan Krishna. That's why Bhakti Yoga is the best. You just keep loving me, Bhagavan Krishna. Chapter 19, Rishi Uddhava wants to know more about the absolute and the relative. In chapter 20, Shri Krishna shares, all of the yogas lead to the absolute. In chapter 21, to understand the absolute, you have to understand the relative also. He explains this generally. In chapter 22, he explains what the relative is specifically. From relative to specific. In chapter 22, we're on verse 17. Sargadau prakritir hyasya karyakarana rupini sattvadibhir guner dhatte purusho vyakta ikshate. Bhagavan Krishna shares, Adau Sarga, in the beginning of creation, Prakriti hi, Asya, there was Prakriti. Rupini, it's in the form of Karya Karana, cause and effect. This Prakriti manifests as Sattvadibhir Gunehi, as the gunas of Tamas, Rajas, and Sattva. But here's the most important point. Ikshate. Who's watching all of this? Who is the witness of all of this? Avyakta, that which is unmanifest, that is the Purusha. In this chapter, Bhagavan Krishna is sharing with Rishi Uddhava that the relative is Prakriti. Prakriti manifests as Tamas, Rajas, Sattva, but the one that is distinct from this, the one who is the Sakshi to this, is Purusha, meaning the spirit. In this chapter, there are many explanations from Bhagavan Krishna about what this multiverse is made of. The tattvas, or the elements, are sometimes classified as 5, as 11, as 21, as 26. There's so many counting variations. But before Bhagavan Krishna even elaborates on this, he shares, for the one who quietens their mind, then they don't go about counting all of these elements. They don't go about dissecting 5s and 10s and 11s and so on. They don't do that. The one whose mind is not quiet goes on comparing, goes on competing. Just think of the term of comparative religions. If you just think of that terminology of comparing religions, what's going to come from that? Competing religions. So quieten your mind so you're less calculating about religions, about relativity, about what people have done for you, not done for you. So those with a quiet mind, they're not concerned about all of these numbers. In the middle of this chapter, Rishi Uddhava proposes what happens if one is not freed from the relative. What happens as they die? And Bhagavan Krishna shares, as you think, that's how you die. As you die, that's how you develop or are born again. So for the person who's thinking so much about the world, what the world says about them, doesn't say about them, where do you think they're going to be born into? Back into the world. And dying is going to be filled with fear because they feel they're leaving the world. But for the one who's not thinking so much about the world, whether the world likes them or dislikes them, as their portal to the world decays and dies, they don't do so fearfully, they do so graciously. Makes sense. Imagine you came to Trinidad with me in November of 2024. And at the airport, you bought $5 sunglasses. And I had my prescription sunglasses, which are very different, correct? And we both went to Maracas Bay, and that wave takes your $5 glasses away. Does that bother you? If you're a cheapskate, yes. If my glasses get washed away, does it bother me? Yes, I can't see without them. Makes sense. As you think, you turn into that, and if you're holding on to things tightly, there will only be fear. You'll be kicking and screaming and crying. But for the one who's not holding on tightly because it's relative, they do so graciously. And just to really accentuate this example I gave to you, my sunglasses are insured by God. So I also wouldn't be kicking and screaming and crying. They'll come back. This has happened to me 3 times. One other point that Bhagavan Krishna makes as he's talking about, as you think, so you die, so you develop. For those who keep thinking about sense objects, remember the ladder of fall, they don't realize how time keeps repeating. They're born, they think, they die. They're born, they think, they die, and they don't realize how fast the years, the lifetimes are going. That's not you, correct? Time is not escaping you, correct? See how relatable this is? And finally, this chapter ends with Bhagavan Krishna sharing, for the one who's tuned into the absolute, they have found or rediscovered the center, the Atma, so they feel more centered. How do you know if you're following Bhakti Yoga? Chapter 19, 20, 21, 22, you feel more centered. How many of you are feeling more centered in 2023? Okay, slowly some people's hands are coming up. Now, it's easy to say that we feel centered. Here's what centered feels like. I'm going to read this to you in English. It is a very high standard. So once again, how many of you are feeling centered in 2023? Okay, so now let me read some of this standard. An aspirant for enlightenment must be subjected by evil men, might be subjected by evil men to abuse, insult, ridicule, and meanness. They might be beaten, imprisoned, deprived of livelihood, spat upon, urinated upon, persecuted for their faith, or might fall into any dangerous situation. In all such conditions, they should, without getting shaken from their high spiritual elevation, remain calm with the self as the support, looking upon all these experiences as brought about by one's karma. So how many of you are feeling centered in 2023? I hope you heard me say spat upon, urinated upon. Their life is in danger. Does everyone know where this is going? Now Rishi Uddhava asks, is it possible for someone to be so centered? Is it possible for someone to rediscover the Atma? And in chapter 23 begins a special Gita called Bhikshu Gita. I'm pausing here for this dramatic effect of what we'll explore next week. Bhikshu Gita is a very special and powerful song within this song about someone exactly like us. I'll describe this person as a user, uses people for themselves, and eventually starts to reflect. In this case, he practices yoga, which is restraining the mind, reflecting on what's behind the mind, and this user becomes a seeker, becomes a master, but all of the people that he used, they come and spit on him, come and urinate on him. So these are some of the introductions to Bhikshu Gita. So next week, I'll ask you again, as we go through these characteristics, have you found your center?